Hello and welcome to this special edition of Worldcon Tonight. I'm Eve Ackerman in Atlanta, and we'll feature the highlights of the 1986 Worldcon ConFederation. A good opportunity for those of you who spent your time in decadent and wild partying to see what you missed, and for those of you who spent your time working on the con to see what you accomplished. So sit back and enjoy the show. Without a doubt, one of the stars of ConFederation was the Marriott Marquis Hotel, Atlanta's newest convention center, and one whose architecture seemed to fit in well with the SF fans. The movie Alien springs to mind when looking upward from the heart of the hotel, and guest of honor Ray Bradbury termed it a perfectly science fiction hotel. Large as it is, the Marquis filled up quickly, as 5,800 fans went through registration between Thursday and Monday, making this one of the largest Worldcons in recent years. The laid-back and relaxed Southern style of ConFederation was established early on with the opening ceremonies, Thursday afternoon, as Con co-chair Penny Frierson officially started the festivities. The highlight of the opening ceremonies was a play performed by Atlanta playwright and SF fan Tom Fuller and friends.
Characters and fully developed plots. Science fiction was ready to expand yet again, to break away from traditional linear forms and experiment. Writers began to strive to create the new styles, new ways of expressing the wonders that welled up inside of them. And with these new narrative styles came a loosening and then a breaking of old inhibitions and taboos. Science fiction was no longer afraid to deal with adult situations and adult themes.
Hey!
What? Is there a problem?
Yes, there's a problem. There's a big problem. You look at this stuff.
Not bad. A bit florid for my taste.
books.
Where did all those lensmen come from, Bobby?
Some of them.
Nitpicking! You are missing the point. The introduction of human emotion and sexuality advances the story. That which advances the story is essential to the story. If sex advances the story, then it isn't dirty, it is literature.
Putting sex in the story makes it literature?
It sure as hell helps.
I don't think this is physically possible.
It is if you have a tail.
This is the same policy that tries to force Edgar Rice Burroughs out of libraries because Tarzan and Jane weren't married.
Yes, they were.
I'm not talking to you!
The only way this can be considered dirty is if you drop it on the floor and step on it. Am I making myself perfectly clear?
Then it's not dirty. It's really okay?
Trust me.
Great. You doing anything after this?
He most certainly is. He's writing.
I am?
You are.
I'm writing.
If you are quiet. Thank you. That was more than a little bit debilitating. Where the hell are we now?
New Wave Press, the 70s, I believe. Yeah, 70s.
Fine. Fine. Excellent. Excellent. A little bit of time lost, but not much. Where's the Travolta suit?
The disco sequence was cut. We couldn't get the mirrored ball or the Bee Gees. Budget.
Hey, you know what? This can really be pretty interesting.
Okay. Then we go directly from late 60s New Wave right into the dissertation syndrome.
Academic encouragement, right.
And out of the ghetto into the mainstream with all your ideals intact. I like it.
He likes it.
Nifty. Why don't you get him set up and we'll try and pick this farce back up.
Oh, hey. Yo.
Moving again, aren't we? I hope it doesn't change too much. I was just getting the hang of this.
Once science fiction crossed over into the mainstream literary world, it was only a matter of time before the next phase in the continuing towards respectability took place. From their ivy-encrusted battlements, the lords of academia reached out and embraced the soaring new art form. Now what?
I just wrote a footnote.
It is very difficult to keep one's concentration with these constant interruptions.
There's footnotes all over this stuff. When the hell did I turn into Jack Vance?
You didn't turn into Jack Vance. Glinda the Good couldn't turn you into Jack Vance. Not even if she teamed up with the Wicked Witch of the West. You are writing footnotes because that is the next step forward.
Footnotes is a step forward?
They are if you're an academic.
There must be something other than tobacco in this thing, because I could have sworn you just said I was an academic.
Patriarchal archetypes in the later works of Robert A. Heinlein. Arthur the Barbarian and the Grey Bouncer, male pair bonding and sword and sorcery. Contemporary Shakespearean mid-cycles and works of H.P. Lovecraft. The pre-Raphaelite roots of Star Trek. These are just the master's theses. Wait till you get to the doctoral dissertations.
Conan Redux, the Howard pastiches of Offutt and Jordan. Harlan Ellison and the emergence of negative reinforcement in speculative fiction. This
is the ultimate crossover, the final triumph of paramount acceptance. Scholarly papers on science fiction. The final fortress has fallen. SF has burst into the Sanctus Sanctorum. What more proof do you need of the viability of science fiction as an art form than the fact that hundreds of graduate students are mining it as a way out of college? You're accepted! We are educational!
Dominant God, cerebral sexual gratification in the gore cycle.
Every con worth attending has a con suite, but Confederation may have had the con suite. The entire 10th floor of the Marriott Marquis Hotel, a large open room, functioned as the con suite. Many fans commented on the spaciousness, the free-flowing soft drinks and munchies, which incidentally cost over $10,000, and the furniture, which served as alternate lodging for more than one fan. The dealer's room lured many brave souls into jaywalking from the Marriott Marquis to the Hilton Hotel, where they could peruse the usual, the exotic, and maybe pick up a blaster or two for the kiddies back home. While perhaps not as exotic as the Marriott, which also housed the standing exhibits, the Hilton was home to the Worldcon films, dealer's room, fan lounge, and panels, and deserves a mention, as does the Hyatt, which served as a backup hotel and was home to the games players, plus the traditional Worldcon blood drive.
In case you're wondering, plasma.
Worldcon tonight obtained studio interviews with attending authors at Worldcon, well-established and those just getting started. One of those whose works continue to receive acclaim is David Brin, Hugo Award winner and a 1986 Hugo nominee for his novel, The Postman.
The only thing, in my opinion, the awards actually mean, as opposed to affect, it affects your career, it affects your money, it affects many things, and I'm very glad to have the awards. But as far as actually meaning anything, I think the award, the nomination means your novella or short story or novel was probably, the 5 nominees were probably 5 of the 10 noteworthy novels or novellas of that year.
Noteworthy or best?
No, not best. Noteworthy, the reading list that you get off the ballot is a good reading list. If, for about half of what, if you could only read 10 novellas, read the Hugo's list, and then find the other 5 that for some reason didn't get in the nomination.
I understand you did not vote for your own novel, and
this year, no, for several reasons.
Why not?
I don't disapprove of voting for your own work. If you honestly think that it's, you know, deserves it. Personally, I thought The Postman was not science fictional enough, and I thought this was an excellent year, and there were several others. The other reason is it's easy for me to say that, of course, because I'm not hungry. Thank you very much. As Mr. Creosote said in Monty Python's The Meaning of Life, I'm stuffed.
what do you consider, then, the best novel?
Of this last year?
Yes.
I think the 2 that I enjoyed the best, that stunned me the most in a science fiction sense, were not on this ballot. Eon by Greg Bear and Artifact by Gregory Benford. I voted first this year, to be, you know, perfectly candid, for Blood Music by Greg Bear, because I think that it was filled with stunning ideas. Struck me in the head with a ball-peen hammer, you know, with ideas.
Right.
But I think several of the others, including the one that won, were excellent science fiction, and the diversity of them. Each was very different from the other in the type of science fiction represented.
And by Thursday night, the convention was well underway with partying and panels in full swing.
Right here could very well be the beginning of some very fine friendships for you, not only at this convention, but at future conventions. So use the sorters. The fact that they came into the room here for this is a likely indicator that you're pretty much on a par as starters. You find a guy in the Custer room or a gal in the Custer room
looms ahead of me. They claim it's just heredity, but a lemming's just no thing to say.
The Orson Scott Card secular humanism revival packed in the faithful. Many were moved by the Spirit, or whatever, to shout amen and give appropriately skeptical responses to Reverend Card's cries of, "Do you believe?"
So here I am, the only secular humanist preacher in the world. I don't mean to be vain, but I hope you know how lucky you are. Having me here in person is like having the Pope of Rome, the Patriarch of Constantinople, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and Jim and Tammy Baker all at the same time. So now, brothers and sisters, I ask you, do you believe? How dare you? How dare you answer that question? How dare you answer yes or no to that question? Now, if I asked you, will you sign here, wouldn't you ask me, what am I signing? And if I asked you, will you buy, wouldn't you ask me, what am I buying and how much is it going to cost? Well, if you're that careful about what you spend and about what you sign, then why are you so free and easy with what you think? When I ask you, do you believe, why don't you answer with a question? In what? We got a little group down here that's been waiting to testify like that all year. Because if somebody asks you, do you believe, without saying what it is you should believe in, if somebody asks you, do you believe, and you answer, I believe, then you're saying yes to things you don't even know. You're signing a blank check and letting him fill it in later. You're signing a blank check against the belief account in the bank of your brain. And I can promise you that there will be an overdraft, and that check will bounce.
Terry Carr is known as both fan and pro, but for ConFederation he donned his beanie to serve as fan guest of honor, sharing with the crowd his memories of getting started in fandom and in some great fannish hoaxes.
The first fanzine I published was in May 1952. I was 15. Please don't read it if you ever happen to run across a copy. That was really bad. But there were a whole lot that followed. I published fanzines throughout my teen years and wrote for other fanzines throughout my teen years. And they weren't any better. Well, yes, they were. They gradually got better. But I mean gradually is how they got better. The thing was, I had given up writing science fiction stories, okay? Started this whole thing telling you how I started writing science fiction stories, etc. And maybe I gave you the impression that I became a professional because I wrote science fiction stories for fanzines. I'm afraid not, because I gave that up very quickly. And instead started writing the other kinds of things that we write for fanzines, which are, you know, articles and columns and what happened to me yesterday and what a great bowel movement it was and things like that. But no matter what you're writing about, you see, it doesn't have to be fiction. As long as you just keep writing all the time, you're going to get more and more fluent using the English language, achieving the effects that you want. I mean, unless you're a total cretin. which none of us are. Except maybe one. Ray Bradbury, to come back to the magic name, has said that anybody who wants to be a serious writer should write 1,000,000 words and then tear them up and then go on to writing your serious stuff. Well, I wrote 1,000,000 words, Ray, but I published them in fanzines. And actually, you know, considering the circulation of fanzines, that's pretty close to tearing them up. It's pretty hard to find those things, thank God. Anyway, you see, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. I may have been 12 or 15 or whatever. I was young. But God, I wasn't stupid. I knew better than to try to be a science fiction writer. You can't make any money out of science fiction. Well, you couldn't then. So it never occurred to me to become a science fiction writer or editor. My God, I mean, they were, I mean, editors could say no to writers, which made them God, right? So I never dreamed of that either. But I had no other dreams except, I must confess, when I was younger, I wanted to be an archaeologist for a while. And then I read a book about an actual archaeological dig in Egypt, and I learned what archaeological digs are really like. You sit in the sand and you spoon sand into a sieve, and you look at nothing coming out of it, and then you take the next spoonful all summer. So I gave that up, and I thought, well, maybe science fiction writing isn't that bad. But even so, I just didn't believe I could do it. I did continue to write a few science fiction stories here and there. But by and large, when I was writing fiction, and I did continue to write fiction because I just loved writing fiction. Ask any decent fiction writer, and he or she will tell you they write because they love it. One of the best-selling writers in our field, I will not mention his name for reasons which will be obvious, he gets advances of $100,000 per book. You know, one of those people told me about a week ago, if they didn't pay me a penny, I'd still write. So I'm not mentioning his name. However, if any editors want to make me an offer, if that writer wants to make me an offer, gee, I said all this. Okay. The main thing about writing for fanzines, which is an advantage over tearing it up and throwing it in your wastebasket, is that you do get a little bit of feedback. So it gives you motivation to keep on writing. The kind of feedback you get will probably be, boy, was that crap. But still, you know, even that is feedback. Somebody noticed. Boy, I wrote a piece of crap and somebody noticed. Oh boy. Generations from now, people will still know, if you're young enough, you know, that sounds good. I remember the first World Science Fiction Convention I went to was 1954. It was in San Francisco. John Campbell was the guest of honor. He gave a great speech. I met Harlan Ellison there for the first time. I met a few other people there too, but Bijo Trimble, for instance, people like that. But the main thing I remember about that convention was that a group of fans got together on Sunday afternoon to make a tape recording to Walt Willis in Ireland. and tell him about the convention. And we brought Harlan in on this. And Harlan, who was then, frankly, not as polished as he is now, but the same person. And he took the mic and he said, "Walt, this is a crappy convention. The biggest name fan here is me." And he was right. Unless you count Sam Moskowitz and Ray Ackerman and so forth, which I guess he wasn't. Sam was there, and he gave me a lesson in personalizing autographs on books. He had just published a history of science fiction fandom up to 1940 or 39 or something like that, which was later reviewed by somebody who said that Sam's book was the only book he had ever read in which World War II came as an anticlimax. But in any case, naturally, I was interested in fandom. Hey, I wanted to know the history because I'm a history nut as well as a science fiction nut and a fandom nut. So I bought the book from Moskowitz, and he autographed it to me. It said, "To Terry, one of the fans to whom this book is autographed, Sam."
There are those SF authors about whom one can truly say they need no introduction. Ray Bradbury is one of those authors. Bradbury, the poet laureate of science fiction, was guest of honor at ConFederation, the first time the longtime fan and author had received that honor. Bradbury proved to be an excellent choice by the Con committee, not only because of his stature in the literary world, but because of his zest for fandom and his willingness to mingle with the crowds and give of himself. His guest of honor speech was well attended and was vintage Bradbury.
So we pass the gift on, don't we? Or we try to. And that's why we're here for this convention. Now, let me give you a few other ideas about my life, because I think if my life proves anything, it's the series of loves that I stayed in love with. I never gave up on them. Began to love dinosaurs when I was 5, saw them at the Natural History Museum in Chicago. I was in love with movies starting when I was 3, Hunchback of Notre Dame. All the Lon Chaney films were simply incredibly fine to me. And I never gave up on these things. When Buck Rogers came into my life, I learned my first lesson about quality and loving when I was 9 years old. I collected those things every day of my life in my 9th year. And the kids at school made fun of me. And like an idiot, I tore up my Buck Rogers comic strips. And 2 weeks later, I burst into tears, and I said to myself, why am I weeping? Who died? And the answer was me. I had killed myself by tearing up those strips. And I had a dialogue with myself, and I said, wait a minute. I need Buck Rogers. I need the future. I care about it. I'm going to go back and collect this, and to hell with all those people. Huh? And I went back and collected Buck Rogers. It made my life whole, and from that day to this, I never listened to another damn fool. Well, and the great thing, 10 years ago, the Buck Rogers family, Mr. Dilley, Bob Dilley, the son of John Dilley, who created Buck Rogers, contacted me and gave me the job of writing the introduction to the collected works of Buck Rogers. Huh? So you have this wonderful cycling around of loves. And one by one, each of these crazy loves in my life has paid off aesthetically and in all kinds of splendid ways. My love of dinosaurs was constant. And when King Kong fell off the top of the Empire State Building in 1933, he landed right on me. Just as he landed on all of you. Huh? My God, what a concussion. Huh? And then when I got up, I got into this fantastic love affair with a 50-foot ape. Huh? Not easy to do, not easy to do. And, but I stayed in love, and then through the Science Fantasy Society again, my life changed. Because I met a young man who was building dinosaurs in his garage. Huh? God, what a friend to have. And he was animating these on 8mm film, and the dinosaurs would run around his backyard and eat up his father. I was always hoping to take some of those dinosaurs home, you know. But anyway, of course, you know who it was, Ray Harryhausen. And we became friends in our last year in high school, and we stayed friends. We pledged our love to one another and to the dinosaurs. We promised to grow old together and to stay in love with dinosaurs forever. And because we didn't give up on them, you know what his career is. All around the world are these wonderful Ray Harryhausen festivals. I'm so immensely proud of him and our loving friendship, which lasts right up to today. Because of my love of dinosaurs, when I was 29, I was living in Venice, California with my wife, and walked along the shore one day, saw the ruins of the Venice Pier, and wondered what that dinosaur was doing lying there on the beach. I told this story earlier today at the film meeting, but I'll do it quickly. And from looking at the roller coaster spinal cord lying there in the sand, got the idea for the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. I wrote that short story, also called The Foghorn. It appeared in the Saturday Evening Post that year, and 2 years later, the film The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms was made with Ray Harryhausen doing the animation. Again, God is being very careful here and watching us. So we pays off our loves. Pays off our loves. Not a very good film, in fact, pretty bad, I suppose. But nevertheless, it was a beginning. And that same year, I got a chance to work at Universal on It Came from Outer Space, a little bit better film, still not a great one, but a very nice one. And then along came John Huston into my life. And if the people who heard me at the film meeting earlier today will put up with this, I'd like to tell that story one more time, because it changed my life forever. All because I was in love with dinosaurs. Because the phone rang, I'd met John Huston many years before, and I'd given him all my books. I said, it's very simple. I love your films. I love you. Someday, please hire me, because I would love to do a film with you. Well, I didn't see him again for 3 years. And the phone rang. It was John Huston, invited me up to his hotel, put a drink in my hand. He said, Ray, what are you doing for the next year? And I said, gee, not much, Mr. Huston. He said, well, kid, how'd you like to come, live in Ireland, and write the screenplay of Moby Dick? And I said, gee, Mr. Huston, I've never been able to read the damn thing. There was a long pause. I don't know how I could have said that. And he looked at me and he said, well, kid, why don't you go home and read as much as you can, and come back at lunch tomorrow and tell me if you'll help me kill the white whale. So I went home that night and I said to my wife, pray for me. And she said, why? I said, well, I got to read a book tonight and do a book report tomorrow. Well, luckily, I have terrible habits in libraries. I think don't you use libraries the way I do? I don't use them with any system. I just rush in, grab a book, open it in the middle, and fall in love. Or I don't fall in love. It's that simple. I don't intellectualize it. The book either grabs me, or it doesn't grab me, and it goes back on the shelf. So I dove into the middle of the book, here, there, somewhere else, 3 places. And by God, by sheer accident, came across wonderful sections, a section where they describe the whiteness of midnight, of panics, of nightmares, of terrors, all the colors of the deliriums at 3 in the morning, all the whitenesses of the whale. Beautiful piece of writing by Melville. And then I moved to a section where it describes the great spirit spout of Moby Dick, like a fountain of Versailles, somehow put to sea and sprinkling the deeps of the soul's midnights. And then toward the end of the book, I came upon a section where Ahab stands at the rail and looks out and says, it's a mild, mild day and a mild-looking sky. And the wind smells as if it blew from the shadow of the Andes, where the mowers have lain down with their scythes. And I turned back to the beginning and I read, call me Ishmael. And I was in love. Huh? And then I went to Houston the next day. I said, yep, I'm old enough to finish reading the book. And I got the job, and I went to Ireland with my family. First time we'd ever traveled. My God, it was wonderful, because just 6 months before, I started in the Cinerama looking at far places, Rome and Paris and London and Egypt. With tears streaming down my cheeks, I turned to my wife and said, my God, when will we ever have enough money to travel? All these far, wonderful places. So all of a sudden, we were on our way to Ireland. And when I got there, and for a while there, I worked on the script. Houston allowed me to do the first 50 pages without reading them, which was very wise. You get into the thing, get it started. And on Thanksgiving Day, about a month later, I turned in the first 50 pages. And John says, well, kid, you go upstairs and take a nap, and I'll call you down about an hour, tell you what I think. And around 5 o'clock that afternoon, I was upstairs waiting. I couldn't sleep, of course. At the bottom of the stairs, I heard his voice calling up to me the most beautiful sentence I've ever heard in my life. He called up, he says, Ray, come down and finish the script. Now, that changed my life forever, because it got me deeply back into Shakespeare. It got me back into the Bible, because they're equal parts of the Bible and Shakespeare in that wonderful book. And I finally said to Houston one night, I said, John, why did you hire me? You know, here I am, a science fiction writer. The world is making fun of you for hiring me. They're all laughing, saying, it can't possibly be. How come? He said, well, it was that story of yours about the dinosaur in love with the foghorn, beast of 20,000 fathoms. And of course, that was it. What he thought he's found in that story was Melville, not true. What he found in there was Shakespeare and the Bible, big influences on me. And then when I did research on Melville, I discovered that Melville had never read Shakespeare until he was 30 years old, because books were in small type in those days. So Melville goes off to Boston, finds a copy of Shakespeare with large type, and falls in love with Othello and Richard III and Hamlet and all the rest, and runs amok. He throws everything out the window. He's been doing a book on whaling, and all of a sudden Moby Dick is born, because Shakespeare comes under his window one night and yells up at him, "Oh, Herman Melville, truly come ye forth, but come ye forth dressed as whale." And he breached the damned whale out of Melville's brow. God, isn't that the way to do it, huh? Yeah. So the same influence on Melville was the influence on me during my youth and in later years. I carry Shakespeare with me everywhere. And as a result of working on Moby Dick, then I had another piece of luck, a piece of intuition, which changed my life in another direction. Now let me go back in time for a second. One of the reasons why we all love science fiction is it's architectural. It's architectural. The vistas of the impossible streets of our childhood. You open buy the magazine Amazing Stories or the Wonder Stories in the 20s and the 30s. And you have these wonderful long avenues going out among these towering skyscrapers. And what you want to do is walk right into that vista, don't you? Walk down those avenues and never come out. So there's the glorious architectural sense that we get from being involved in science fiction. And of course, now in the last 17 years, what do we have? It goes back, of course, to things to come, architecture itself. And being in this building, my God, this is a great place for the conference to be held, isn't it? It's H.G. Wells' country. Huh? So, but anyway, starting with 2001, what have we had? Architectures in space, not ships, but architecture, cities, whole cities floating out there. And they pull our souls with them, don't they? We want to go with those cities, not ships, with those cities into space. And then in Close Encounters of a Third Kind, what do we have? The mothership comes down, but it's not a ship. It's a population cased in this great wondrous shell with all the lights. And it's a moment on the Sistine Chapel ceiling where God's hand comes down this way and Adam's finger reaches up this way and the spark leaps the gap across the universe. So we have an architecture in front of us there, and we want to get on board and go away and never come back. Huh? So this constant reference to architecture in all of our lives, one of the great pulls, one of the great reasons for our loving what we did. All right, so suddenly now I make a discovery that leads to architecture in my life. And all I loved when I went to the World's Fairs in Chicago in 1933. I fell in love with the future there, the future buildings, wondrous to walk amongst them and go home on the train at night weeping to be leaving the future behind. And then the day comes when they tear the future down, and it'll be a long time coming after that. So then when I finished Moby Dick, I wrote an analysis of Jules Verne and Herman Melville. No one had ever done this. No one's done it since. I don't know why it wasn't done a long time ago. Because we have two mad captains, and I noticed the resemblance between the two madnesses and Moby Dick and the Nautilus. Huh? No one has noticed in the last 100 years, until I stumbled over it, that in the first chapter of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, when the Nautilus appears in the seas of the world, it is described as Moby Dick the white whale. Huh? The evidence has been there all that while. We mean that, which means what? That Jules Verne read Melville. So we have two mad captains. One mad captain who says, I will strike the sun if it insults me. And the other mad captain who says, no, don't strike the sun. Plug into the sun, borrow the energy, and create a new world of inventions. Huh? Do not kill the whale. Invent a whale and live inside of it. Build the whale. And scour the seas of the earth, preaching peace and brotherhood to mankind. So over there, two mad captains, the two whales, one living flesh and one metal, wrote this essay called The Ardent Blasphemers, which was the introduction to a new edition of 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. And the United States Pavilion people came to me from the New York World's Fair with this fabulous architecture. They had a building which cost $50 million. The whole top floor, as big as a football field in size, was the American Pavilion. And they said, can you write a 17-minute history of the United States in 17 minutes flat with a full symphony orchestra? I said, yes. Because I'd been studying my Melville and my Whitman and my Poe and all of the other fabulous early American writers who were writers of ideas. Writers of ideas. Hawthorne was one of the first fantasy science fiction writers in the last 200 years. And people forget to call him by that name, but he was an idea man, fascinating person. So I had all this background in American history, but I had to find the metaphor, didn't I? Before you can do anything in this world, you have to find the metaphor, whether it's for a haiku, whether it's for a small poem, whether it's for a screenplay or an essay, whatever. You have to have a handle to pick the whole thing up with and galvanize the people so they'll pay attention and know what you're talking about. So I came up with the idea of the triple wilderness. Americans is a triple wilderness people. Wilderness of water, grass, and stars. We crossed a wilderness of grass to reach this place. We lingered for a little while on a wilderness of grass, and we now move toward a wilderness of stars to live forever. Water, grass, and stars. Once you get the triple metaphor, you can write the history of the United States in 17 minutes flat. Huh? You got the metaphor to do it with. I did the metaphor, I wrote the prose, they brought in the symphony orchestra, and inside of the building we dramatized the history of our country. As a result of that, the Disney people next door came over and saw what we'd been doing, and when they went to work on Epcot 8 or 9 years ago, they called me in again, and they said, this time, can you do a history of ideas and communication covering 2,000 years in 15 minutes flat with a full symphony orchestra? I said, yeah, I can do that. And this time, it was harder to find the metaphor because you're all over the place and you're talking about discoveries back in Egyptian times and things up ahead. But I've been rereading the wonderful book God's Graves and Scholars by C.W. Sarum. It's still one of the best archaeological books ever written. And in there I came across the story of Schliemann once again. which is a remarkable story and an example for every child and every grown person in the history of our country. Well, what was Schliemann story? He fell in love with Troy when he was 10. He talked about Troy when he was 12. He wanted to go find Troy when he was 14. All of his friends said, no, Troy never existed. It was a myth. It was a fairy tale. Don't bother. Don't try. Why do you want to do this? Who tells you to do this? And his answer was, blind Homer speaks to me. Blind Homer tells me where to dig. And they said, you're going to listen to a blind man instead of to us? And he says, yes, out of the way, out of the way. And he was in his late 40s before he finally went and bought a spade, and he dug where blind Homer told him to dig, or almost where Homer told him to dig. And what did he find? Not one Troy, not 4 Troys, but 9 Troys at various levels of sophistication going down into the dust. Huh? And when he left, other archaeologists coming found 30 more Troys, or what they took to be Troys. So 39 Troys where none were supposed to exist. So I said to the Disney people, there's our symbol, there's our metaphor. Let's use Schliemann as an example. Let's bury the past and then dig it up again. Let's triangulate history. Go back in time to the beginning of time and come forward through the caves with the drawings on the walls of the caves, through the Egyptian period, through the Renaissance. And as we pass through the Renaissance, I want a robot animatronic mannequin up on the Sistine ceiling painting the ceiling as Michelangelo. Huh? And by God, we built it and put it up there. Huh? And so finally, as a result of this series of encounters, I wind up working on the main building at Epcot, which opened 4 years ago, Spaceship Earth. If you go down, my metaphors are in the building. Now, what's the point of all this? The point of this is the series of my loves propelled me into all of these things. I didn't stop to think. I was just madly in love with architecture, with World's Fairs, with comic strips, with dinosaurs, with movies. All of them mad loves, thoughtless, huh? But when you digest enough of them, tens of thousands of movies, tens of thousands of pictures, learn screenwriting through comic collection, then the jobs begin to appear, and suddenly people are saying, will you do this? So I wound up working for the Air and Space Museum in LA. I've got a 2,000-year history of astronomy there in 12 minutes flat, which opened 2 years ago. Now, all of this is fascinating because, and most of us don't stop to think why we love science fiction so intensely. I never really questioned it, and I found the answer to myself and to all of you in the poetry of William Butler Yeats only 3 years ago. That's awfully late in time, isn't it, to discover why you love science fiction so madly. Okay, what's the reason? It's in the last line of a poem by William Butler Yeats, Sailing to Byzantium. And in that last line is the destiny of mankind from the past to the present to the future in all of your lives. The last line reads as follows: of what is past or passing or to come. Of what is past or passing or to come. All the ideas of mankind, from the cave to here, everything that surrounds us right now, all of the technological marvels with their inherent dangers that are right here, and then everything in the future for the next million years. The total history of ideas, that's why we're important, huh? Science fiction is the most important fiction ever written in the history of the world, and we are responsible for it.